Okay, getting everything set up, ready to go. Doing a sound check first. I'm gonna go in, check YouTube, make sure everything is going good. Gotta have it, I gotta go in and put it in the playlist as well. Here, let me check that audio. Sounds good. I need to check my volume mixer too. I think the mic's back on. No, it's off, so don't know what that was all about. Let me double check. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so we've got it going. Today's another episode of conspiracy, and here in a minute I will get everything going and up and going. So I want to check D Live out first, make sure if it's running, or check and see if it's running or not. Been having issues with it lately, so it's always best to go in there and check it, make sure. All right, give me a second. There we go. It looks like it is up and running. So we are ready to go, and I will do my countdown. Now I'm not recording right now, but it is um, it is. I do my countdown because it's actually good for editing purposes. That way, I know when to cut the, or I know when the beginning of the actual video is. So, with that being said, I am going to get on with the show. I'll do my countdown, do my introduction, and we'll be ready to go. Let me take a drink of my coffee first, and we'll do the show. Okay, three, two, one, now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Conspiracy here on the wonderful world of weirdness. This week, I've had, first, let me say I'm Roger Hanson, and I'll be your host for the show today. And with that being said, I will start the show. So, like I was getting ready to say, this week has been quite an interesting week. I've had some pretty interesting topics going on. I ended up doing a lot of or a couple of simulcasts. I'm starting to do simulcasts for Dragus Production on Wednesday nights, which is on Rumble, and well, actually, it's on Rumble, X, Twitch, Kick, but not on YouTube. I do that because I think his shows would, or Mark's shows would do really good on YouTube, but I know how he feels about it, so I don't put them on YouTube. Other than that, I also do WPRPN for Jaffe Ryder or Captain Sinclair, whichever personality he's in at the moment. But I've had some pretty interesting streams. I also have Untethered, which I've been working with Mark Edworthy and Mr. Robot on it, which is pretty good. And that is a very, very interesting video series that we've been doing. I've decided to use one of the topics that we had a roundtable for this week as this episode's topic, which is uh, generations of warfare. And that is something that I wanted to go through because it fits perfectly with what I've been talking about when it comes to conspiracies and what's going on in the world today, and actually the beginnings of it. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and read the talking points that I had for Untethered on here without the commentary from other people, and just get it on this episode because it's pretty good stuff. So, with that being said, let me go ahead and get on with the reading. So, the first generation of warfare refers to the period of organized state conflicts typically waged with line and column tactics, such as those seen in the Nepl- Neoplaton. Ne, ne, I hate saying this word. Um, Neoplatonic, Neplonic, Neplonic, Napoleonic is what is actually seen in the Neoplonic Wars. um, this generation emphasizes order, discipline, and direct confrontation between standing armies representing nation states. Combat was characterized by massed manpower, musket volleys, and bayonet charges in structured formats or formations on defined battlefields. Now, the focus was on the superiority of strategy and the discipline of troops under centralized command. Now, with that, we come to the Irish Rebellion of 1798. This fits into the frame of first generation warfare. This generation of warfare is characterized by massed manpower, line and column tactics, like I said before, and the use of relatively simple battlefield strategies, which were dominated by muskets and bayonets. Now, first generation warfare typically features centralized state armies engaged in open field battles using rigid formations and close range weaponry. In 1798, no, the 1798 rebellion, led primarily by the Society of United Irishmen, was an uprising against British rule in Ireland. It was marked by conventional engagement between irregular Irish rebel forces and the well-trained British military. While the rebellion did include elements of guerrilla-style resistance, the primary confrontation occurred in line battles, ambushes, and town assaults that reflect the era's conventional military doctrine. The use of volunteers, militia, and poorly equipped insurgents going up against a regular army also reflects some of the transitional elements between the first and second generation. But overall, the rebellion still fits most closely with first-generation characteristics. This includes the reliance on direct confrontation, structured units, and relatively unsophisticated communications and logistics compared to what would emerge in later centuries. The second generation of warfare emerged with the development of rifle weapons, machine guns, and artillery, shifting the emphasis from maneuver to firepower. This generation retained a structured battlefield but introduced more advanced forms of indirect fire, trenches, and massed artillery barrages. World War One exemplifies this type of warfare. Military thinking continued to focus on attrition, coordination, and obedience within hierarchical command structures, with success measured by holding or gaining ground. Propaganda in World War One fits primarily into the context of second-generation warfare. Second-generation warfare is characterized by the use of mass firepower, industrialized military production, and more centralized command structures, reflecting the technological and organizational development of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. While the primary feature of this generation relate to battlefield tactics, such as the shift of linear formations to trench warfare and the heavy use of artillery, the supporting structure around the war effort included propaganda, also evolved dramatically during this time. Propaganda during World War One became a state-organized industrial-scale effort used to mobilize entire populations for total war. Governments produced posters, films, pamphlets, speeches, and manipulated newspapers to shape public opinion, boost morale, demonize the enemy, and encourage enlistment in war bond purchases. It marked one of the first times propaganda was deliberately and systematically used across multiple media platforms to influence both domestic and foreign audiences on a large scale. While propaganda itself is a timeless tool that predates modern warfare, its formal integration into military strategy and civilian control mechanisms during World War One aligns with the institution and technological developments institutional and technological developments of second-generation warfare. It also laid the foundation for more sophisticated psychological operations that would become central in third and fourth generation warfare. The Geneva Protocol of 1925 fits most closely with the second generation of warfare, although its legacy and implications continue into later generations as well. The second generation of warfare was characterized by massed industrial armies, trench warfare, and heavy reliance on artillery and chemical weapons, most notably seen during World War One. The horrifying use of chemical weapons like chlorine, phosgene, and mustard gas during that war prompted global outcry and led to the drafting of the Geneva Protocol. This protocol specifically prohibited the use of asphyxiating, poisonous gases, and bacteriological methods of warfare. It reflects the norms and expectations of warfare as experienced during that second generation. While the Geneva Protocol emerged from the context of second generation warfare, it has had an enduring influence on the rule of armed conflict in all subsequent generations. Its prohibitions and the principles behind them have informed the development of an international humanitarian law, including the later Chemical Weapons Convention, and have relevance in fourth and fifth generation warfare as well. For example, in asymmetrical or unconventional warfare, no, for example, in asymmetrical or unconventional warfare, the use or threat of chemical and biological weapons by non-state actors continues to raise legal and ethical concerns rooted in the standards first established by the protocol. Similarly, in fifth generation warfare, where warfare may involve biotechnological manipulation or covert chemical sabotage, the Geneva Protocol still provides a legal and moral boundary. However, its original context and purpose were clearly situated within the second generation's technological and battlefield realities. The 1925 Geneva Protocol, formerly known as the Protocol for the Prohibition of the Use in War of Asphyxiating, Poisonous or Other Gases, and of Bacteriological Methods of Warfare, best fits into the second generation of warfare. This generation is characterized by industrialized state-on-state conflict that was prevalent during the early 20th century, especially during World War I and World War II. Warfare in this period was defined by mass mobilization, trench warfare, extensive use of artillery, and the introduction of new technologies such as tanks, aircrafts, and chemical weapons. The Geneva Protocol was created directly in response to the widespread and devastating use of chemical warfare during World War I, where chlorine gas, phosgene, and mustard gas caused significant casualties and long-term suffering for soldiers and civilians alike. The second generation of warfare relied heavily on conventional armies with structured hierarchies, uniformed combatants, and centralized command. The Geneva Protocol addressed the need to regulate and restrain certain technological advancements in warfare that had proven especially inhumane. It was is directed primarily at nation-states and was meant to influence how they conducted war under international norms, which aligns with the structured and formalized nature of second-generation warfare. Although the legacy of the Geneva Protocol has extended into later generations of warfare, including asymmetric and non-state conflicts where chemical and biological threats still loom. Its origins and immediate impact are rooted in the second generation. It was a legal and moral response to the excess of mechanized weapon war, developed during a time when large armies and industrial capacity defined military strength. Thus, while its influence has carried forward, the protocol itself was a product of the specific conditions and ethical reactions that followed the industrial scale warfare of the early 20th century. The third generation of warfare marked a major shift towards maneuver warfare and speed, using mobility and surprise to bypass enemy defenses and collapse them from within. This generation gained prominence in World War II with the German concept of blitzkrieg. It emphasized decentralized decision-making, initiative at lower command levels, and raid penetration to disrupt enemy rear areas. Tanks, mechanized infantry, and air support played crucial roles in achieving tactical and operational superiority without relying solely on attrition. The Biological Weapons Convention of 1972 fits primarily within the framework of third-generation warfare. This generation, which developed during the Cold War era, is characterized by a shift from attrition-based warfare toward maneuver warfare, increased use of advanced technology, intelligence, and indirect strategies. It marks a departure from massed formations and industrial-scale destruction towards greater emphasis on precision, speed, and disruption of the enemy's command and control systems. The Biological Weapons Convention, as a former multilateral disarmament treaty, reflects the strategic environment of this period. After World War II and in the context of the Cold War arms race, there was heightened global awareness about the devastating potential of weapons of mass destruction, not just nuclear arms, but also chemical and biological agents. The convention was the first international agreement to outlaw the production, stockpiling, and use of an entire category of weapons, representing a maturing of legal and diplomatic tools in response to the evolving nature of conflict and deterrence. Here's where I add in a note to go with that. The history of propaganda spans multiple generations of warfare, but it is most closely associated with the third, fourth, and fifth generations of warfare due to the development of communication technology and psychological strategies used in conflict. In the third generation of warfare, which emerged in the early 20th century and was exemplified by the World Wars, propaganda became highly institutionalized and widespread. Governments made use of radio broadcasts, newspapers, posters, and films to shape public opinion, demonize adversaries, mobilize civilian populations, and maintain morale at home. The industrial scale and global nature of warfare during this period made propaganda a powerful weapon to justify military actions and influence national and international perception. As warfare evolved into the fourth generation, characterized by irregular combat, asymmetrical conflicts, and the rise of non-state actors, propaganda took on new forms. Psychological operations, disinformation campaigns, and media manipulation became central to both state and non-state strategies. With the distinction between civilians and combatants becoming increasingly blurred, influencing hearts and minds became as important as territorial control. Insurgents groups, terrorist organizations, and even corporations began to use propaganda to promote ideologies, recruit supporters, and destabilize traditional governmental structures. In the fifth generation of warfare, propaganda has become even more sophisticated and covert. This form of warfare emphasizes control over information, cyberspace, and perception. It involves the use of social media platforms, artificial intelligence, data analytics, and psychological profiling to manipulate narratives and belief systems on a massive scale. The aim is not necessarily to win battles in the traditional sense, but to influence political outcomes, sow discord, and weaken the internal cohesion of societies. Propaganda in this context does not rely solely on spreading one version of the truth, but rather on overwhelming the information environment with conflicting messages, confusion, and mistrust. In this way, propaganda has transitioned from a support mechanism in earlier generations to a central strategic weapon in modern geopolitical conflicts. Third, gener- Third generation warfare emphasizes not just battlefield tactics, but also psychological operations, propaganda, and global positioning. The biological weapons convention fits this generation because it was designed to counter the threat posed not only by conventional forces, but by covert or non-traditional methods of warfare that could cripple populations or destabilize nations without direct military confrontation. It anticipated the dangers of biowarfare being used for strategic leverage or terror rather than purely for military engagements on a battlefield. The psychological warfare division fits into the framework of third generation warfare. Third, gener- Third generation warfare emerged during and after World War II and is characterized by speed, maneuverability, and decentralized tactics aimed at bypassing enemy lines and attacking from the rear. It emphasizes disruption over direct confrontation and introduces the idea of warfare being fought not just on battlefields, but also through strategic deception and influence. The Psychological Warfare Division was established by the Allied forces during World War II to manage propaganda, information control, in morale-related operations against Axis powers. They focused on shaping the perception, emotions, and behaviors of enemy soldiers, civilians, and occupied populations. This involved the use of radio broadcasts, leaflets, rumors, and other media to sow confusion, fear, and dissent behind enemy lines. Lord Haha, the nickname given to William Joyce, fits into the context of third-generation warfare. He operated during World War II, broadcasting Nazi propaganda in English to British and Allied audiences via radio. His work exemplifies the psychological and informational tactics that were increasingly recognized as strategic tools during that era. Third-generation warfare focuses on maneuver, deception, and indirect methods of undermining the enemy, not just through physical combat, but also through psychological disruption. Lord Haha's broadcast aimed to lower Allied morale, spread fear, and create confusion among listeners, all of which are core elements of psychological operations that evolved as a key component of warfare during this period. The fourth generation of warfare deviates from state-centric models and includes non-state actors, asymmetrical tactics, and information warfare. It is marked by a blurring of the lines between war and politics, combatants and civilians, the battlefield and society. Insurgencies, terrorism, guerrilla movements, and psychological operations are key characteristics. This conflict often lack front lines and are fought as prolonged struggles over legitimacy, ideology, and influence. Examples include various insurgencies in the Middle East and other post-colonial conflicts around the world. Vietnam War propaganda and misinformation fits into the fourth generation of warfare. This generation is characterized by psychological operations, media manipulations, and the deliberate use of information to influence public perception, morale, and political will, both domestically and internationally. Unlike previous generations of warfare that relied mostly on direct battlefield confrontations and state-on-state conflicts, fourth-generation warfare involves non-traditional tactics, including the strategic use of propaganda and misinformation as primary tools of engagement. In the Vietnam War, both the United States and North Vietnam engaged in complex propaganda campaigns. The U.S. government employed misinformation to maintain support for the war, often portraying progress that contradicted the realities on the ground. Statements from military and political leaders frequently assured the public that victory was near, even when battlefield situations suggested otherwise. Meanwhile, North Vietnamese forces capitalized on images of U.S. bombings and civilian casualties to generate global outrage and anti-American sentiment. Radio Hanoi and other outlets targeted U.S. troops with demoralizing broadcasts, while anti-war movements in the United States were partially fueled by revelations that contradicted official government narratives. These efforts to shape perception, manage information, and exploit psychological vulnerabilities align with the core strategies of fourth-generation warfare. The Vietnam War is one of the clearest historical examples of a conflict where control over narrative and belief became as important as control over territory. The role of the United States news media during the Vietnam War fits squarely into the framework of fourth-generation warfare. This generation of warfare is defined by its emphasis on information control, psychological influence, and the erosion of the distinction between combatants and non-combatants. Unlike earlier generations, which were focusers, fourth-generation warfare brings the media, public opinion, and societal perception into the battlefield itself. During the Vietnam War, the American news media became a critical force that shaped public perception on the conflict. Graphic footage and critical reporting brought the realities of war into the living room of ordinary citizens, fundamentally altering the public's support for the war effort. The famous footage of the Tet Offensive and My Lai massacre are daily casualty reports play a powerful role in undermining the legitimacy of the U.S. government's narrative and war strategy. This period marked one of the first major examples of what would later be called information warfare. The enemy was not only in the jungles of Southeast Asia, but also in the minds of the American public, whose shifting attitudes were significantly influenced by what they saw, heard, and read in the news. As such, the Vietnam War became a battlefield not only of conventional arms, but also of media narratives, psychological operations, and sociopolitical legitimacy. These dynamics are key characteristics of fourth-generation warfare. Propaganda in South Korea fits primarily into the framework of fourth-generation warfare. This form of warfare involved non-state actors, information warfare, psychological operations, and the blurring of lines between war and politics, military and civilian, and front lines and home fronts. In the context of South Korea, propaganda has been shaped by decades of tension with North Korea, where both sides have engaged in psychological warfare through loudspeaker broadcasts, media messaging, cultural dissemination, and disinformation campaigns. South Korea's counter-propaganda has included both defensive strategies and offensive messaging aimed at undermining the North Korean regime, influencing defectors, and promoting democratic and capitalist values. Furthermore, with the rise of digital platforms and cyber capabilities, South Korea uses no, South Korea's use of propaganda, especially in relation to North Korea, information control, foreign diplomacy, and regional perception management, also shows elements of fifth generation warfare. However, the core strategic use of propaganda in the Korean Peninsula began under the conditions of fourth generation conflict, making that the most fitting classification. The Chemical Weapons Convention, which was signed in 1993 and came into force in 1997, fits into fourth generation warfare. This generation is characterized by the erosion of the traditional state-centered model of warfare, the rise of non-state actors, and the use of asymmetrical strategies, including terrorism, insurgency, and information warfare. While the convention itself is a state-level treaty meant to eliminate an entire class of weapons globally, its relevance within fourth-generation warfare stems from how chemical weapons have increasingly been used by non-state actors and rogue regimes, often in irregular conflicts where traditional rules of engagement do not apply. The convention reflects the global community's attempt to maintain control over a world where warfare had begun to blur the lines between soldiers and civilians, battlefields and cities, and legitimate armies and loosely organized militant groups. By the time this treaty was implemented, concerns over chemical weapons had shifted from state versus state use, which was the hallmark of earlier generations, to the fear that such weapons could fall into the hands of terrorist groups or be used in civil conflicts. Fourth generation warfare requires international frameworks like the Chemical Weapons Convention to respond to decentralized threats that are difficult to predict and control. The treaty represents both a legacy of earlier arms control over arms efforts, and an adaptation to a new type of global conflict, where international norms are tested by non-traditional combatants. Operation Enduring Freedom fits into the framework of fourth generation warfare, with elements also edging into fifth generation warfare. While it involved traditional military operations at the outset, such as airstrikes, troop development, and the toppling of a state power in Afghanistan, it quickly evolved into a complex conflict involving non-state actors, insurgency, asymmetric tactics, psychological operations, and information warfare. In fourth generation warfare, the lines between combatants and civilians are blurred, and non-state actors such as insurgent groups and terrorist organizations play a central role. This was clearly the case in Afghanistan, where the U.S. and its allies faced a prolonged guerrilla-style insurgency from groups like the Taliban and later elements of the Islamic State. These groups operated within civilian populations, used irregular tactics, and avoided direct confrontation with superior military forces. There's where I make a note, and this is operational, or this is where I make a note, and it goes Operation Enduring Freedom also transitioned into a fifth generation warfare context as digital technology, surveillance, media narratives, cyber operations, and cultural influence became key strategic tools. Fifth generation warfare focuses heavily on controlling perceptions, shaping ideological battles using artificial intelligence and data analytics, and influencing political outcomes without open warfare. Propaganda, cyber capabilities, and psychological operations became increasingly prominent in the broader conflict, especially in social media and digital platforms, where use no especially as social media and digital platforms were used to recruit, spread ideology, and sow confusion. The war on terror primarily fits into the fourth generation of warfare, but also significantly incorporates aspects of the fifth generation. Fourth generation warfare marks a transition away from traditional conflicts between nation states towards prolonged struggles involving non-state actors such as terrorist organizations, insurgents groups, and ideological motivated networks. During the War on Terror, this was demonstrated through global campaigns against decentralized enemies like Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and later the Islamic State. These groups often operated across national borders, utilized guerrilla tactics, and embedded themselves within civilian populations to evade conventional military confrontation. Additionally, the War on Terror employed various strategies that relied heavily on psychological operations, propaganda efforts, and counterinsurgency measures. The objective extended beyond battlefield victories to shaping perception and securing political and ideological influence, both internationally and within the domestic sphere. The struggle was as much about winning public support and influencing belief systems as it was about eliminating physical threats. As the conflict evolved, it began to reflect characteristics associated with fifth generation warfare. This generation is defined by the use of advanced technologies, cyber capabilities, and sophisticated information control mechanisms. The War on Terror saw the increasing use of cyber warfare, global surveillance systems, predictive algorithms, and drone strikes directed by remote targeting technologies. The battlefield extended into digital platforms where control of information, influence over social narratives, and disruption of enemy communication became critical components. The fifth generation of warfare is considered more abstract and involves the use of advanced technologies such as cyber operations, artificial intelligence, social media manipulation, the cognitive warfare. It operates in domains that affect perception, beliefs, and behavior more than physical control. Actors in this type of warfare may not be governments or military forces, but can include corporations, anonymous groups, or individuals using network tools. The aim is to disrupt, deceive, or demoralize rather than engage in direct physical confrontation. It is often invisible and persistent, targeting both infrastructure and public consciousness. Quantum cellular automata-based nano-router circuit designed for nano-communications networks fit most appropriately within the fifth generation of warfare, and even points towards the emerging contours of a sixth generation as warfare evolves beyond traditional kinetic operations into complex, highly technological, and abstract domains. Fifth generation warfare is characterized by its emphasis on information dominance, psychological manipulation, cyber and digital technologies, and the fusion of civil and military spheres. In this context, quantum cellular automata and nano-communication networks represents cutting-edge tools in the pursuit of strategic advantages that do not rely on conventional military confrontation. These technologies offer the potential for highly miniaturized, secure, and efficient data transfer systems capable of operating at the molecular or atomic level, an ideal fit for surveillance, data gathering, targeting, delivery of digital payloads, and potentially in biological environments. Nanoscale communications and computational systems, especially those incorporating quantum principles, may be deployed in intelligence gathering, monitoring human physiology, or interfacing with artificial intelligence in real-time decision-making processes. These applications exemplify warfare strategy that prioritizes control, prediction, and subtle influence over direct force. As the military begins to integrate biotechnology, synthetic biology, brain-machine interfaces, and quantum computing into their frameworks, the emergence of what some theorists might eventually classify as sixth-generation warfare becomes apparent, where conflict is less visible, often preemptive, and deeply embedded in both technological ecosystems and the human mind. Neurodust, bioelectronics, and electroceuticals belong to fifth generation warfare, while also pointing towards what may become the foundation of sixth generation warfare. These technologies represent a major evolution in the way influence, control, and conflict are carried out, extending the scope of warfare beyond traditional military arenas and into the biological and neurological systems of human beings. Fifth generation warfare focuses on controlling information, shaping perception, and achieving objectives through non-kinetic means, often in ways that are difficult to detect or define. Neural dust and electroceuticals fit within this framework by offering the possibility of monitoring, influencing, or even altering human behavior and body functions remotely and silently. Bioelectronics and electroceuticals involve the use of miniature implantable devices that can modulate organ functions or nerve activity through electrical signals. Though originally intended for medical treatment, these technologies could also be applied in military or intelligence contexts to subtly influence the individual's physical or mental state. This opens the door to the possibility of behavior modification or surveillance at a biological level, bypassing traditional methods of control or coercion. Neural dust, which consists of microscopic sensors capable of interfacing with the nervous system, could be used to collect real-time data from individuals without their knowledge, raising profound ethical and security questions. These developments mark a shift in the battlefield to the internal space of the human body and mind. This is in direct alignment with the core characteristics of fifth-generation warfare, which is defined by its focus on influence, perception, and the manipulation of reality rather than direct confrontation. At the same time, these technologies hint at the emergence of a sixth generation of warfare, where the targets of conflict may become a person's thoughts, decisions, identity, and biological autonomy. Rather than deploying troops or weapons, future conflicts could involve invisible and invasive technologies designed to quietly assert control over individuals or populations from within. Quantum dot cellular automata, or QCI technologies, fits within the broader scope of fifth-generation warfare, while also overlapping with the emerging traits of sixth-generation warfare. QCE or QCA is a type of nanotechnology that replaces traditional transistor-based computing with quantum effects at the nanoscale, allowing for ultra-fast, low-power processing and miniaturized circuit design. While originally developed as an innovation in computing hardware, its potential military and intelligence applications place it firmly within the evolution of modern warfare. In the context of fifth-generation warfare, which focuses on information dominance, perception control, and technological integration into psychological, digital, and nanokinetic domains, QCA serves as an enabling infrastructure. It allows for faster, more efficient processing in devices used for surveillance, encryption, autonomous systems, and even neural interface technologies. These devices do not necessarily require physical confrontation to exert influence or control, which is one of the hallmarks of fifth-generation warfare. At the same time, the development of QCA points towards sixth-generation warfare by supporting technologies that could be used in autonomous decision-making systems, artificial intelligence, directed combat operations, and human-machine interfacing at a nanotechnological level. As warfare moves increasingly towards precision, influence, neurological manipulation, and invisible control networks, QCA could form the computational backbone for systems capable of monitoring or acting on real-time behavioral or environmental data. Thus, QCA fits squarely into fifth-generation warfare by enabling the non-kinetic, psychological, and data-driven aspects of modern conflict. Its potential for integration into biodigital systems, autonomous weapons, and ultra-secure computing platforms also signals its role in shaping the emerging sixth generation of warfare, where the lines between human biology, machine intelligence, and state power become increasingly blurred. That brings us to the end of the reading. Um, I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, please remember that we do stream on Rumble, X, Twitch, Kick, and YouTube. The Wonderful World of Weirdness has channels on Rumble as well as YouTube. Also, we have playlists for all the shows that we do, as well as a playlist just for the live streams that we have. So you can check us out there on Rumble and on YouTube for playlists as well as the channels. Now on Twitch, Kick, and D Live, I do not have any channels that are specifically for the Wonderful World of Weirdness, but you can find us on there. You can find us as you can find us on D Live as Roger_Hanson. On Twitch, I am Infamous 1969. You can check me out there as that. And on Kick, I believe I am also Roger_Hanson. Now on YouTube, that's game, or that's actually the Wonderful World of Weirdness, which is pretty much the easy one to do. You can find me on there in Rumble as well. But on X, you can find me as just regular Roger Hanson at ROGLOL1973. So that is it. I will check and see if anybody actually said anything or made any comments. It doesn't look like I did get any comments. I did get a comment on D Live from Dragus earlier today when I was doing my Blender project stream. I guess this would be a good time to say thank you for stopping by. Do a shout out for you. If you guys want to check his, or if you want to check Dragus production out, you can check them out on Saturdays and on Wednesdays and on Sundays. On Wednesdays, they usually start their shows around 4:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, or 4:30 Central Standard Time. That's 3:30 Pacific Standard, I believe, or Pacific Time. Then it's Now I gotta do math. Now it's and then 5:30 Eastern Standard Time. That's 10:30 in England, and anywhere else I couldn't tell you. Good luck with that. Uh, if you don't know, sorry. But yeah, you can check them out at those times on Wednesday. Now on Sunday they have Censorship Sucks, which is a pretty good show. You should stop by and check that out. I don't know the specific time on that one, but I know that it is on like at 7 p.m. my time when I go on there. So that's 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can check them out on that. On Rumble. They usually stream on Rumble. They stream on Twitch as well as Kick. And I believe they're still doing Odyssey. I'm not quite sure on that or not, but you can check them out there too as well. Um, also, I guess that's pretty much all I have to say, really. I'm done. I'm finished. I went through, I checked to see if there was anybody on there. Nobody's made any comments, so I got out of this one free and clear. So let me go ahead and get the heck off of here. I hope you guys did enjoy this. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, make comments. Love to hear your feedback. Just say hi, man. Have a conversation with me. Um, it doesn't matter. I just like to have conversations and do that in the comment section too, not just in the chat because I like to hear the comments in the comment sections and respond to them too. So if you have time and you want to say hi, feel free to stop by. Say hello, and I'll respond. I try my best to respond to every comment that's made in the comment section because I know how important that really is. So, um, yeah, now I can just shut my mouth and stop talking. I usually try to make it to an hour and 15 minutes. So I've created this long spill to where I can keep people on and just keep running my mouth. So, with that being said, I hope you guys have a good day, good evening, good morning, good night, whatever time of the day it is for you. And I am going to end the stream. Yep. Talk to you later.